Now, it's fair to say that Arsenal's transfer window has been confusing at best so far. While it was clear that we need forward signings coming in, we have prioritised bringing in backup players in the defence and the midfield, which has highly dominated the transfer window so far. Now, not only that, we have had some weird reports in the last few days about Ethan Nwaneri's new contract situation and also more links to Noni Madueke. In this video, we're going to try and make sense of it and try and calm a lot of you Arsenal fans down. So let's get into it. Now, before this video starts, I obviously do want to say it's been a hard couple of days, I think, as people within the football scene. I want to leave it in my thoughts and prayers of the family of Diogo Jota and Andre Silva, and I wanted to be clear that that is my thoughts, even if this video isn't necessarily about that topic. Now, I have been someone that has always been pretty positive about Arsenal's transfer window this summer. I really like the links and the consequential signings of people like Kepa in the end, I guess, for this situation. People like Norgard I thought made sense, and people like I think is an incredible backup replacement for someone like Tomiyasu, who has obviously now left the club. Now, ultimately, are these signings the most exciting players in the world? No, they are not, and I definitely don't think that they should be regarded as that either. These are just small backup players that will help the team and get better, but as a fan and a lot of you people watching, I'm not saying that you should care about these indently. They're going to help, they're definitely going to be big, vital components, but not something that necessarily is the priority or what matters right now to the club. Now, what does matter is the forward areas. I think from an Arsenal fan perspective, or at least my perspective, I've been quite patient and allowed the team to take their time in these signings because they are hard deals to complete, especially with some of these teams and how they've been acting. And also the fact that everyone in the market knows we want forwards and doesn't really know how much money we're willing to pay, but thinks we are willing to pay a lot, which does put us in quite a negative leeway when trying to make these deals. Now, that being said, I've always maintained that I would want and expect at least one forward signing to come in before pre-season starts. Now, we're getting closer and closer to the start of pre-season, with it starting in a week and a half from now, while the team has started to be training together. Some of the players that got that holiday break in the summer through June and May are now coming back and playing with the team, and it definitely feels like Arsenal are trying to ramp up some forward signings, and we're seeing a lot more links to a lot more players recently. Now, obviously, we've spoke about the Eze one a few times now, and if you want my opinions about that, go on Twitter, go on my other videos where I've spoke about it quite intently. And overall, I'd say I'm quite happy with that signing overall, but I'm not happy if it's only the left wing signing and he's not seen as like a backup or natural starting midfield player, which is what I want him to be. And also, I'm not happy if the fee is around £68 million, but I know Arsenal are trying to negotiate and get that down. Personally, I don't think I'd pay that much for him. Now, that kind of leads us on to this Noni Madueke talk. Now, if you haven't seen it, I made a big tactical video about why he potentially would work in the team, and I know a lot of people didn't like that. I know a lot of people don't want to hear it because they don't like Madueke as a player, which I completely understand. And ultimately, I have said quite thoroughly on Twitter my opinions of this player and if he was to come to Arsenal. Now, first of all, I'm going to say that my concerns with him coming in is nothing to do with the player. He is actually very underrated, and I think a lot of the concerns about him is misguided. As someone who watches a lot of Chelsea and has done videos on Chelsea, when you watch them last season, Madueke was one of their main outlets in attack. Then they play against low blocks, he is the main guy that creates chances. You even see a lot of the time for their team that someone like Cucurella kind of plays as like a centre forward type player, runs into the box and gets in there. That is because the right hand side is the one that does all the progression. When you look at some of Madueke's stats, they don't stand out to you, but when you delve a little bit deeper, you start to see the real attributes that would help Arsenal. He's brilliant at carrying the ball every time he receives it against a low block. He goes past players in the wide stretches and he gets a lot of shots away. If you compare his shot from 2 seasons ago, they were pretty poor. He was shooting a decent amount outside the box and they were at an average of 0.02. So he's kind of being wasteful, not worth it. Last season, however, Madueke had over 3.5 shots per 90, which is already a big increase from 2.5 the year before. And look at his shot locations. That is someone that is getting in the right areas and getting shots away. Now, we can talk about his prolific and his ability to score from these chances, which hasn't been brilliant, and I think he leans back sometimes and is a bit wasteful, and you can definitely improve that. And we can talk about how he's hot and cold. There is some months where he's one of the best wingers in the Prem, and there's some months where he is kind of useless, and I understand that from that perspective. However, I do think as someone that can come in and be someone that just drives at the team and is especially someone very good in low blocks that can shift the ball out, and I think he would work better with a left winger that's proper quality. Like if you're playing a Martinelli and Madueke as 2 wingers for me, I just don't think that's enough prolificness, and I think I would rather have someone like Rodrigo come in obviously as well. And I do think Madueke has that ability to explode. I've been speaking to a lot of analysts recently, and a lot of people have kind of given the same feeling to me that they think his at least goal scoring ability will improve. He gets in the right areas, he's had a great amount of shots, and he's always very lively. There's things that he isn't brilliant at. He's a lanky player, his dribbling isn't always consistent, he's not always the best dribbler in the world, and I think especially when it comes to decision making in terms of passing, there is a lot of weaknesses there. But ultimately, he isn't coming in to be an Arsenal starter, he's coming in to be a backup behind Saka if the reports are rumoured. Now, I know there's questions about him being from Chelsea, and I know a lot of people are going to argue that we're going through their bins again. Personally, I don't really care. I never really cared about that sort of thing. I just look at how good a player is and how I believe they are good, and I've always kind of rated Madueke as a high potential player and a player that's very good. I also don't think that our record for Chelsea signs is even that bad. I think it's about 50-50. You've got the Sterlings and Williams, which are the real awful signings. You've got the Czechs and David Luiz's, which were a lot to be desired by, but I don't think ultimately were that bad for Arsenal. I think they were fine given the price and the point they came in. And I think Havertz and Jorginho were successes. I know some people would disagree with that, but you can argue about maybe the price of Havertz, but he is one of our best players, whether you like it or not. Now, the fee is kind of where it gets a little bit complicated, and also the knock-on effect with the team with other positions is also where I'm concerned. £50 million is what Chelsea apparently want for him, which I think kind of makes sense. They spent 30 million on him. He's definitely improved since his time at PSV at Chelsea, and I could go into loads of tactical details of why they probably will be willing to get rid of him, and I think it's quite clear that they're not really doing wider players and they're playing inside a bit more, but obviously this is not that for that video. So I do think a cheaper fee would be much better. If Arsenal can somehow weave their way into getting a £30 million deal, then I do think that would be a fair enough use of finances. I think if we're talking about a Saka backup anyway, it should be around the £30 million mark, and I don't mind paying that, but that 40 to 50 mil is where you really start to worry about the knock-on effect of other players. I also do understand from a perspective of scouting, it is a little bit boring. I get that we all kind of want maybe more younger players, even though Madueke is not that old, but someone that's maybe a little bit more exciting or maybe a little bit more question marks on him. I think we know what you're going to get from Madueke, even if he does improve. Someone like Kubo I've mentioned before, because apparently he is available for around a cheaper price. Someone like Bakayoko, I know a lot of people have liked, even though I think some of the same problems might still be there personally. And I think Madueke probably is a better player than both of them, and I think people are really disregarding his actual ability. But is he worth that extra 20 mil to spend? Probably not, given where we are in the market and what we need. And the reason why that is the most complicated thing within the squad is what that does to specifically Ethan Nwaneri. Now, I've always been of the motion that Ethan Nwaneri should not be the backup for right wing and right centre mid next season. I think it's too much for him. He played way too much last season, contrary to popular belief on Twitter for some reason. And I think there was a lot of regards that he needs to rest. Now, this is where the big reports have been coming out. Obviously, Ethan Nwaneri needs to sign a new professional deal. Obviously, Miles just signed one, as they had that other deal they signed as like a youth contract one coming into the first team. And obviously, they deserve a big pay increase for that minutes they played and the amount of game time they actually got last year. Now, Ethan's agency seem to be causing a little bit of a stir. They've been looking at details and they've been asking for assurance on play time for Nwaneri. And there's been obviously talks about Chelsea would be able to go in if that deal was available. Now, personally, I think this is a little bit of fear-mongering. I think this is a little bit of the agency trying to get more money for him, because this was the sort of same thing that happened a year and a half ago when he signed that contract, his first professional deal. We had the same problems with all these teams trying to come in to get him. They were trying to strung up his agency, and I do think in the end he said he's an Arsenal boy, he wants to stay, and I'm sure personally I think that that would still be the case in this situation. And I do want to say quickly on this, because I don't really get frustrated all too much about what people say, but ultimately I think some of the Ethan Nwaneri comments are completely misguided as well. I've seen so many people on Twitter say that he deserves to leave, he just hasn't played, did you see the end of the season? But ultimately he is an 18-year-old. He played the 25th most minutes out of any teenager in world football last year, and I think only about 7 or 8 of them you could consider are on the same level in terms of elite clubs, and there's only 3 or 4 of them are actually forwards, let alone not midfielders or defenders. So there has to be context within the situation. He also played a lot on that right wing, where I still don't think the club want him to play. This is where the Madueke links kind of link in, and I think if Madueke is to come in, you would see Ethan be that a backup for Odegaard on the right centre mid spot, where personally I would rather him be. He's an interior player, he likes cutting inside. I don't think putting him out on that right wing deeper is the great use of his skills. He can do it, he can improve there, but I just don't think that's where you want him to be. I also think it's funny how we're talking about Chelsea buying him, where Chelsea are trying to talk about Madueke leaving when he was one of the best wingers last season. They've got a host of other wingers that they've bought, and they're probably going to buy even more this summer, next summer, every year. So where are you going to play for them? You even think about attacking midfield positions. They just brought Pedro in to play on that left 8. They've got Cole Palmer. They've got a host of other players that can play in them central areas. Enzo plays a lot more elevated up in them positions as well. So where is he going to play? That's even more congested than a team like us, even though we are playing at a different level. Now, there is a few things though about this that are certainly interesting. Hand of Arsenal, obviously a very well-regarded source in the community, and I always reference him, mentioned that Noni Madueke has got a personal terms agreed with the club, which was reported by a lot of sources yesterday. And in there, he says that the situation with Ethan Nwaneri will be clearer in the coming weeks or in the soon to come time. Now, this is very interesting how he says this. Personally, I think you can look at this in two ways. Even he will sign a new deal and it's calm. He doesn't mind the minutes he's playing. And personally, I do think he played a lot of minutes last season. So maybe there needs to be a certain level of him being rested. And that's maybe why Madueke might be coming in. But also, this may point to a loan decision to get him some minutes somewhere else. Now, I always think that's quite weird because Ethan's that one youngster that the club have really regarded on. But it does need to be said that Arsenal shouldn't be forced to play teenagers who need development in different areas of their game when Arsenal are trying to fight for the league title. I think Ethan is good enough to play considerable minutes, but ultimately he needs to develop as a player and get considerable minutes to do that. And I don't think Arsenal should be shoehorning him into the team just because, oh, he needs to improve. We need to win the league at the end of the day. And maybe that's where the club are thinking that they can go and get him minutes. And this is where like the sort of Eze links also kind of link in, because I don't mind a Madueke coming in as that third attacker for relative price. 30 to 40 mil. It's not probably as exciting as an Eze, not as good as an Eze, a lot of people would argue, but it makes more sense, I think, in terms of building a squad of where people are going to fit. Now, Ethan can be the backup for Odegaard for the foreseeable future, where he will still get good minutes. Odegaard isn't going to play all the time, hopefully, and we can rely on Ethan at least a little bit more. He needs to get stronger under tight contact. We know that in the tighter areas, he needs to get better, and he needs to have a little bit more to his locker than this interior play that he has to receive the ball out wide and come inside. But that's obviously things he's going to learn as he gets older and better. So it does leave a lot to be desired on where actually Ethan is going to get minutes. Now, it kind of depends how many minutes you think Ethan should get. I personally think he will sign a new deal. I think he's still enough. How can a young player sign a new deal saying he loves Arsenal, play a huge amount of minutes for a forward player in a team fighting in the Champions League latter stages and the Premier League title, and then want to leave? In my opinion, it just doesn't make any sense in that way. I do think there's a lot to be spoke about with the current transfer news, because apparently there is rumours that Arsenal are doing the Madueke deal separate to an Eze deal or a Rodrigo deal or a striker deal, which I don't really understand how these can all be separate, because obviously with money and the players, they're all interchangeable. But there is no position I ever thought Arsenal would be looking at 4 forwards in this market. I was being quite optimistic saying that we should get 3 and that I want 3 in, but I never really thought that that was a concrete chance of happening. I just never really know with this club at this point. And with the centre-back of Mascara coming in, with some of the sort of changes we've done to the rest of the squad in other positions, such as Norgard coming in as well, which I didn't expect, I just kind of felt like it wasn't really viable to probably get 4 forwards in, which obviously I would love and I really want, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen, especially the high profile big signings like these ones that we are talking about. Now, if the Madueke deal is separate to them and we still go out there and we buy left winger and striker, maybe not even an Eze, maybe if you do pick over a Madueke over an Eze, I think you can still find sense in that. I know a lot of people won't be happy, but it's not the end of the world in my opinion. But ultimately, we need to get that star left winger in and that star striker. Now, the star left winger is obviously Rodrigo. That's going to take time. We're waiting to see what happens. But the longer the days go on, the longer the match he's not playing, and Real Madrid apparently don't want him, there has got to be a consideration that Arsenal are there on the door. Hand of Arsenal's come out and said that his priority if leaving is Arsenal. We spoke to him multiple times and he likes the project, which is positive news. It means that if he is available and actually wants to leave, we can get him, and that I think would calm a lot of the fan base down. Also, this striker situation is all up in the air. I don't know which one we're getting at this point. And you've got to think, if 4 of these players do come in, if it is a Madueke, if it is an Eze, and the 2 striker and left winger, 1, what does that do for Ethan Nwaneri and the minutes that he's going to get? And 2, what does that do a knock-on effect with a lot of the players in the squad? Now, David Ornstein has reported a few times that Arsenal might have to sell a player, like a star one, especially in the attacking areas, in order to facilitate one of these moves. And there's obviously been rumours about Martinelli, but it's come out that Arsenal don't really want to sell him. But if 73 mil is on the table, I definitely think we'll have conversations. We've still got Trossard Trossard, he's not going to sell for a lot of money, but in terms of squad building, he probably should leave. And even people like Havertz or Odegaard, I don't think Havertz or Odegaard will leave this summer, but there has to be a consideration if all these players come in. Maybe we're stockpiling talent for 1 year, so then we can get rid of these Havertz and Odegaards for good money next year when they're still going to be worth a lot. I think a lot of the fans, and me included, don't trust us to make 4 signings, and I think that's where this frustration for Madueke comes in. And I don't begrudge anyone that has a preference to get Eze in or a preference to not have Madueke in, but it has to be based in facts. I hate that people are kind of basing it on the fact he's a Chelsea player. Is he the best player in the world? No, but nor is Martinelli, and people love him. So ultimately, we will find a use for him, I think, within the team to make it work. And as a backup to Saka, ultimately, it just gives us more minutes to have rest, which is one of the biggest things we've needed for about 3 years. I've been making videos on it for a long time. Now, overall in the comments, let me know what you guys think. I know a lot of the Madueke things are going to be quite negative, but I want to kind of ease it a bit on the Waneri. I think Waneri will re-sign. I think this is all just his agent, and they've done this stuff before, so we've got clear evidence that they have been like this before as well. So that is something to take into effect. But thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it as always, and I'll see you in the next one.